Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. This webinar is presented by brightbod.com. My name is Kelsey. I'm not a doctor. I'm just presenting on my experience tonight. If you have any questions, during the webinar, you can make a video recording of yourself asking the question, and you can do this by going onto brightbod.com and going into the support group for autism. I or someone else at Brightbod will respond back to you in a video recording. So we're going to mute all the microphones and they'll be unmuted afterwards for any questions. I strongly encourage everyone to ask questions. And so tonight, I'm going to tell you a good deal about social skills therapy and specifically how it affects individuals with autism. So many people assume that since social skills seem to be inherently understood, that they're easy to understand or easy to replicate for other people. This is not the case for some individuals with autism. In fact, the social self is extremely complex. Social skills build on prerequisite skills, some of which develop at infancy. So as a result, what appears to be a basic skill is actually really complicated in nature. In terms of characterizing external signs of social impairment in an individual with autism, there are some signs to look for. So one of them being poor eye contact. Another is a lack of interest in initiating social interactions, or a lack of understanding of emotions and how emotions are expressed. And then lastly, literal interpretations of non-literal language, such as metaphors or sarcasm. Many individuals with ASD need social skills training throughout childhood and into adulthood, starting with basic skills and moving all the way up to the most higher level and most complex social skills. So the implementation of social skills therapy will vary with each individual. It just depends on their developmental stage and where they're at developmentally. So what is social skills therapy? As the name suggests, it helps an individual improve their social interaction skills, both verbally and non-verbally. It's not exclusively used for individuals with autism. It's used for other disorders as well, such as anxiety and ADHD. For this presentation, I will be focusing just on how social skills therapy is used for individuals with autism, but please note that not every individual with autism needs social skills therapy. Essentially, social skills therapy provides people with the ability to converse, to share, to play, to work alongside their peers, basically just interact in any way that is appropriate for your age. And there's typically 10 checkpoints for social skills therapy. Bear with me as I list them. The first is initiation of speech. The second is eye contact. The third is appropriate content of speech. So for example, knowing when to say please, thank you, you're welcome, etc. Fourth is appropriate tone of voice in speech. Fifth is number of words spoken. 6 is appropriate facial affect. 7 is appropriate motor movements. 8 is conversational speech. 9 is number of interactions. And finally, 10 is an overall rating of social skill proficiency. In terms of social skills therapists, they're generally social workers, psychologists, occupational therapists, or speech and language therapists who specialize in working with individuals with autism. There's no specific degree for social skills therapy, but many social skills therapists specialize in a specific therapeutic method, which shows that there's not just one way to implement social skills therapy. It's very flexible and really depends on the individual and how they react to different types of therapy, kind of just whatever works best for them. Previous research has shown that a 7-step model is really effective for social skills therapy. So the first step would be to set a goal. So you choose and really define a manageable social skills goal. The second is teach. You explain what the behavior looks like and why it's important. The third is model, so you demonstrate the desired social behavior. For practice, you role play the desired behavior. 5 is prompt. You prompt for a natural display of the behavior. 6 is reinforce. You reinforce group members after they demonstrate the behavior. And finally, 7 is generalize. you encourage the practice of the behavior outside of the social skills group. There's various types of there's different examples of the types of therapy that you can implement. It's very flexible, as I mentioned before. It also depends heavily on if you're working with a child or with someone older. But here are just a few different types of therapies used within social skills therapy. So the first one is social stories and comic strip conversations. They both incorporate stories and drawings to strengthen social understanding. Social stories are brief stories that are personal to the individual and help with understanding social situations. So the story describes the situation and uses the individual's and other people's feelings as the key elements of the story. A parent or therapist can assist in developing such a story. So, for example, if a child has a negative social encounter, when you get home, the parent could sit them down and kind of walk them through and have them describe the setting of the situation, describe the other people that were around and what they may have been thinking during the encounter, describe what the individual themselves was thinking or said during the encounter. And then in the end, the story could describe different options for socially desirable behavior for such a situation in the future. Comic strip conversations are very similar. They have the same goal as social stories, but instead of writing, they use pictures. So an individual will draw basically just a comic strip and they'll use thought bubbles to describe what they were thinking, what other people were thinking during the interaction. Moving on to hidden curriculum. This involves teaching unspoken social rules. So the term hidden curriculum in this case refers to a set of social rules that many people pick up naturally and are not necessarily taught directly, but it may be very difficult to express for an individual with autism. Examples of hidden curriculum range from very basic and subtle actions to more complex situations. So, for example, teaching a child that only the birthday boy or girl opens presents on their birthday, or if there's a jacket hanging on the back of a chair, that means someone's already sitting there and so you should choose a different seat. So it seems like very simple things, but it's just not as simple for someone who struggles with social skills. For social scripts, this just involves teaching scripts for common social situations. So the individual learns a scripted question or phrase that they can then implement in conversation with other people. Once again, this can be used for a child or an adult. For a child, maybe having a question, did you have fun playing on the slide today? And they'd actually have this question written out on a card for them to use almost as a crutch. And they use that card until they're able to implement that question or a similar question or phrase by themselves, just spontaneously in conversation in the future. For computers and other technology, this involves using videos, software, or virtual reality programs to teach complex social skills such as recognition of emotions and facial expression or tone of voice. So videos are really helpful for individuals with autism because specifically for body language, because you can slow down the video or even pause it and discuss it at that direct moment. So if someone's sitting up really tall versus like crouching down, what does that mean? What does that imply about the individual during that time? And researchers in Alabama have successfully demonstrated that a computer-based program called FACE helps children with both low and high functioning autism improve their ability to recognize emotions and interact socially. There's actually a lot of different softwares that are similar to this that have proven to be really effective. And lastly, social skills groups offer an opportunity for individuals with ASD to interact with each other and other typically developing peers on a regular basis. So these groups are usually pretty small and they will range just for a certain age group. And so there'll be a group facilitator that will lead the group and kind of guide them through different activities to practice general life skills. These groups are very flexible. They kind of just depend on the facilitator, and it's at their own discretion. how they think the group should be led. There's different types of these groups. So for example, there are improv groups that encourage individuals to converse spontaneously through different games and activities. It encourages giving up control and just kind of going with the flow, and kind of replicates just a normal conversation in real life to an extent, because you never know what someone else is going to say or reply back to in conversation. And then you always need to be on your feet to figure out what you're going to say back or how you're going to reply. So improv groups have been shown to increase self-confidence, self-expression, and listening and attention skills. Similarly, a different type of social skills group is drama groups. They're actually kind of the opposite of improv groups, because they rely on scripted interactions, kind of just like any general drama club, where an individual is provided a script and they kind of act out a play. And even though the conversation is scripted, they're still interacting with other people in a conversational manner. So it's actually been shown to be really effective even outside of the group in normal conversation. Essential aspects of therapy and tips for implementation. Specifically for children, free play, recess, and other unstructured times are the most difficult, especially for individuals with autism. So thinking about how to impose structure on activities is really crucial for someone who struggles socially. And also note that social challenges, while very real in each instance, will vary individualistically for individuals along the spectrum. So even though they're experiencing the same situation, they're not experiencing it in the same way. They may be thinking different things, or they may react very differently. And you kind of just have to take that into account, that no one's going to just have the same reactions. Flexible thinking for individuals with autism is often usually somewhat difficult. So especially for children, playing something like dodgeball is really not a good idea, because you're expecting the child to understand that you can throw a ball at another child, but not an adult or a teacher. And you can't throw a ball at another child unless it's during the game of dodgeball. So it can be very confusing. Teaching context clues and referencing those around you is really helpful. So if, for example, if everyone else around you is standing up, as kind of your key, I should be standing. So just teaching a child or just an individual in general to kind of look around and take in the atmosphere around them to decide what their next move should be and what they should be doing during that time. Teaching social boundaries is crucial. So, for example, teaching the individual things that shouldn't generally be talked about in public, and how to maintain personal space. So the visual I have here, definitely more effective for children, but kind of just visually shows the center is your family, your close social circle. So it's the largest space. You can kind of interact with your family in any way. You can kind of talk about any different topic. But as you move outwards with friends, it's still pretty close to your central circle. But with acquaintances, it's bordering on strangers. And then finally with strangers, it's very different how you would interact with strangers compared to your family. So kind of just visually showing how it gets further and further, and how you need to know the boundaries depending on who you're with. And lastly, just celebrate the individual strengths. This doesn't matter what age the individual is. It's really important to recognize when a child or an adult or an adolescent makes strides in therapy. So even if it's something very small, just recognizing that and kind of just reinforcing that behavior will make the behavior more likely to happen in the future, which is a good thing. Overall, how social skills therapy is beneficial, just in general, it can improve mental health and overall quality of life for a child or adult with autism. So it's especially important all the time, but especially when you're getting older, applying for jobs, you need to know how to interact with someone in an interview situation. Even if you're not the most comfortable in that situation, you need to know how to present yourself and how to converse. And even just more generally, forming relationships with someone, that's something you do from the time you're a little kid all the way up until you're an adult and older. So it's really important to know how to interact socially to maintain such relationships your entire life, whether it be just friendships or relationships, romantic relationships. The research on the effectiveness of social skills therapy for treatment in individuals with autism is somewhat limited. Social skills training is often overlooked by researchers when they're measuring the use of autism treatments. I think this somewhat has to do with the fact that a social skills therapist isn't technically a degree, so there's a lot of variation in the way it's implemented. But previous research has shown that social stories are the 5th most frequently used autism treatment. And it's also shown overlapping evidence for the need to foster self-esteem and self-awareness within social skills interventions to ensure there's progress in individuals on the spectrum. Another finding shows the need for interaction with peers during the therapy to assure that the skills learned during therapy are they're able to use them independently in the future and don't need to rely on the therapist for utilizing such techniques. And then lastly, making sure skills are generalized to be used in various social contexts is really important. So teaching someone how to interact not in just one conversation, but in several different conversations, and just generally how you interact with different types of people. So that concludes my presentation. I'm now going to open up the floor for questions.
Hello.
Hi.
Kelsey, what if you know of a friend or a family who has an autistic child, but you've never met that child? If you're meeting that child for the first time, how do you greet that child, or do you treat that child any way different from a regular child?
So autism is a spectrum disorder. So everyone with autism reacts differently in different situations. There's very low functioning autism and there's very high functioning. So someone with high functioning autism, you may not even realize the first time you meet them that they have autism, but for someone who's more low functioning and has it more severely, it would maybe be more obvious. But I would say just approaching that situation in general, knowing that they do have autism, it's always better to not be hands-on, because someone with autism gets overwhelmed easily, and loud noises are never a good thing. So kind of just approaching the situation like slowly, keeping your distance, saying hi, and just kind of feeling out how comfortable they are. And if they're really talkative and can converse with you easily, then you kind of just go off of their cue.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm going to piggyback onto what the question she just asked. I know you have high functioning and low functioning individuals with autism, but do they all not make eye contact, or some do?
Some do. It definitely depends. Most have trouble making eye contact, but there definitely are individuals with autism who can make eye contact just like anyone else can.
Okay.
So, Kelsey, in other words, you can be, are you hearing me?
Yes.
Can you be autistic and not lack social skills?
Yes, definitely. So social skills therapy is definitely not needed in everyone with autism. Autism is tricky since it does vary so much, just from individual to individual. So you kind of just have to see, it's very obvious, just like it is in a typically functioning or typically developing child, they can struggle with social skills also. So it just depends. You kind of have to take the cue, as I said before, from the child themselves.
Okay, so just because somebody doesn't have the social skills, avoids eye contact, etc., doesn't necessarily mean it's an autism sign.
Definitely not. Yeah. It's not just
limited to autism.
Yeah, it's not just, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Especially with anxiety, people can just have social anxiety, and they need to go to social skills therapy as well. So it just depends.
Okay.
Kelsey, is there a technique that you can use whereby you can teach or decipher to an autistic person how they would go about balancing personal boundaries?
I think there's several ways you could do that. Just some of the examples that I mentioned, like role playing is really effective. So you kind of just teach how you would interact with your mom, for example, versus how you would interact with someone you just met. And you can even use the individual's real mom, so they're, especially for a child, just so they're more comfortable, and show them like the way you're interacting with your mom is, and then bring someone who's a stranger and like just kind of show them in person like the difference between how you would interact with someone that you've never met before and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. I think for children it's really effective to show them visually. So if it's not in person, through pictures, like kind of just the visual I had with the circles, that can be really effective just in explaining how they can kind of visualize themselves when they should or shouldn't say something or do something depending on who they're interacting with.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
How can you begin to figure out which situations in social settings are going to be difficult for a child? I mean, you used two examples. You said if there's a coat on the back of a chair, don't sit in that chair. You used another one. I can't remember what it is right now. But it would seem to me that you have to teach them every single possible situation. I mean, is that really is that their approach, or do you first figure out what it is they probably don't understand and zero in specifically on that one part of etiquette?
I think that's why social skills therapy is so varied and there's not just one way, because it just depends on the individual. So I think, yeah, it's impossible to teach someone every possible social interaction. So you kind of do see where they struggle the most. Even just in the 10 checkpoints that I mentioned early on, with making eye contact or with knowing what someone's facial expression means, like you start with those the basic 10 checkpoints and make sure they know that, and then you try to generalize it. So you try to you can't make them ready for every situation, but I think the best approach is to generalize just general social skills to as many situations as you possibly can. And then as they progress or don't progress, you can just work from there and kind of change your approach or adapt it as need be.
Okay, thanks.
What about in the workplace, Kelsey? Since this can be for adults as well as children, is that possible for maybe in a workplace situation where you have maybe, I don't know, employees or people that need help with their social skills? How could that be done, or how would that be done?
So I think for adults, the groups are really helpful because a lot of the other types of therapies are geared more towards children. So I think the best way would be for the implementing social groups, and I'm sure there are for adults that just focus on workplace etiquette and just how you interact with people, even just from small things like saying hello to people when you get there, and talking in the break room, asking general questions, like kind of how I was mentioning with the scripted questions. There's always just nonsensical things that people talk about in the break room, such as like, oh, the weather today, stuff like that. So there is specific things that you can, they can kind of discuss and practice within the group to make them be able to use it in a work life situation.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Kelsey, question. In the social scripts, the social stories, comic strip, conversation kind of a situation, I'm trying to see if I got this right. The therapist would I guess, design a comic strip after they built some kind of rapport with the child, and then they would do like a play acting sort of a situation? Is that what you're saying?
So it would really be based on the individual's own experience. So if they came into therapy that day and mentioned something about they had a negative interaction with someone at school the day before, then you would take it off of that story. So it has to be something that's personal to them. So they would kind of explain, you would ask them like, who was around, what did you feel, what did they feel? So it's very particular. You wouldn't just choose a random story. It's very important that it's coming from them and something they actually experienced, because the idea is to, if it was a negative encounter, that means maybe they didn't react appropriately. So the idea is to, by the end of the story, you give them different options of what they can do in the future if they run into a similar situation.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Kelsey, you said there were 7 social skill models. And one you said was to set goals. What was that? What is that all about? Setting goals?
So basically, it will depend on, again, very repetitive, but it really depends on the individual. It depends on their age, and it depends on how functioning they are socially. So that's the first step. So the whole model is just one model, but it's 7 steps. So the first step is to just set a goal. So you can't just teach someone everything at once. So it would be something as simple as recognizing body language, and that's going to be the goal for the week. So for that week, you'll go through the different 7 steps with that goal in mind, and if they master it by the end, then that means they completed it and they can move on to the next step. So then the next week you'd set a different goal. So it's just very simple things that may seem like little, but it just makes sure that you're not kind of overwhelming the individual with too many things at once, so they're actually retaining the information and can actually do it themselves independently outside of therapy as well.
Okay, thank you.
I think there might be a paper on top of your microphone or something covering your microphone, Kelsey. Is that
better?
Yeah, it's much better. Okay, thanks.
The therapy that is administered, then it has to be individualized and not like in a group. If that's what you, that seems to be what I'm hearing. Is that correct?
So that's half correct. So the individual therapy is really important because it will depend on just where the specific person's at. But group therapy is also important because group therapy is where they can interact with other people. So there's different goals set for group therapy compared to individual therapy. Individual therapy is definitely needed first. They need to learn one-on-one. They need to be accomplishing these specific goals. They need to be practicing just with the therapist, because the whole basis of social skills is that, or of the therapy, is that social skills might give them anxiety, or they don't know how to do it around other people. So they need to have that confidence with the therapist. And then later on, the groups are really helpful because that's how they're going to learn, and that's how they're going to carry on the skills they learn in therapy in the future by interacting with other people. But it's helpful because other people in the group also it's all for social skills therapy. So they're going through the same thing as well. So it's kind of not just throwing them into a real life situation right away, but they can learn together and grow together while still interacting in everyday situations or conversations.
Oh, okay. All right, thanks.
Hi, have you noticed better results when you're acting out plays that are not really that scripted, or is it better to provide some type of script or some type of structure for the child or the children, or is it better to be more open and let them just have fun exploring?
So there's two different, as I mentioned, the improv therapy groups kind of let you do your own thing, and they just give you a topic, and it's like improv comedy. You just have to like go off of that, and it's very spontaneous. But then on the other hand, the drama groups are very scripted, so they're very different, but they're both seen to be effective. I think it just depends on what the individual is most comfortable with, but they're both proven to be very effective outside of therapy. They just use different techniques.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, if you do have any, you can, as I said before, make a video recording of yourself, and I or someone else at Brightbod will respond to you back with a video recording. So I just wanted to thank you all for listening, and I hope it was informative for you.